What if everything we thought we knew about human history was wrong? What if the textbooks, the documentaries, and the experts who claim to have solved the riddle of our past were missing something? Something enormous. Tonight, we journey deep into the shadows of prehistory, into a mystery that could rewrite the story of humanity itself. In Denmark, an ordinary man pointed his camera at the night sky. What he captured would ignite debates across the world. It wasn't a blurry light, not a vague streak across the horizon, but something far clearer, something undeniable. These images, they may be the most compelling evidence of an unidentified craft ever recorded on European soil. But why Denmark? Why now? And why do these sightings coincide with strange electromagnetic disruptions being reported across neighboring countries? This is not just another UFO story. This is a puzzle stretching across nations, drawing the attention of scientists, governments, and even NATO itself. Stay with me as we uncover what could be the clearest proof yet that something, or someone, is watching us. Let's start with the man at the center of this storm, a Danish amateur astronomer named Ole Jensen. For years, Ole had a simple routine: set up his high-powered telescope, connect his digital camera, and spend hours marveling at the cosmos. But on one unusually clear night, something appeared in his viewfinder that didn't belong. It wasn't a satellite. It wasn't a meteor. It was silent, dark, and moving with a purpose that defied conventional physics. He tracked it for 17 minutes, capturing hundreds of high-resolution frames. When he reviewed the footage, his blood ran cold. The object was a perfect triangle, its surface seemingly non-reflective, absorbing the starlight around it. There were no visible means of propulsion, no sound, no heat signature his equipment could detect. Just a silent black void moving against the backdrop of the Milky Way. Ole, initially hesitant, shared his findings on a private astronomy forum. Within hours, the images went viral. Skeptics immediately cried hoax. They claimed it was a drone, a secret military aircraft, or simply a clever digital fabrication. But then, something happened that no one expected. Independent verification. An observatory in northern Germany, over 100 miles away, reported having tracked an anomalous object on the same night, at the same time, on a trajectory that perfectly matched Ole's sighting. Their data confirmed its speed, its altitude, and its bizarre, silent movement. This wasn't a local phenomenon anymore. The object had crossed international borders. Suddenly, this was no longer a matter for internet forums. Mainstream news outlets in Scandinavia began picking up the story. Governments were forced to respond. The Danish Ministry of Defense issued a terse statement, acknowledging an unidentified aerial phenomenon, but offering no further explanation. Germany was even more tight-lipped. But behind the scenes, a different story was unfolding. Leaked internal memos suggested that multiple air forces had been scrambled, only to find nothing. The object had simply vanished from radar. This is where the story takes an even stranger turn. Coinciding with the sighting, a wave of unexplained electromagnetic pulses was detected across the region. Power grids in rural parts of Sweden experienced sudden, brief fluctuations. Communication systems for shipping vessels in the North Sea reported bizarre static and signal loss. Were these events connected? Some physicists began to speculate that the craft's propulsion system, whatever it was, could be interacting with the Earth's magnetic field in a way we don't understand, causing these widespread disruptions. This wasn't just a passive observation. It was an active interaction with our planet's infrastructure. The puzzle was growing, and its pieces were spread across hundreds of square miles. NATO's involvement became an open secret. While they never officially confirmed an investigation into the Danish Triangle, sources within the alliance spoke of a high-priority intelligence brief being circulated among member nations. The key question wasn't just, what is it, but what are its capabilities? An object that can outmaneuver fighter jets, become invisible to radar at will, and potentially disrupt critical infrastructure is not just a scientific curiosity. It's a potential security threat of the highest order. The silence from official channels was deafening, and in that silence, speculation and fear began to grow. What was being hidden from the public? Let's analyze the evidence we have so far. First, the photographic data from Ole Jensen. Experts in digital forensics have examined the raw files. They found no signs of tampering, no layered images, no CGI. The light, the pixel data, the metadata, it all checked out. The images are, as far as we can tell, genuine. Second, the corroborating radar and observatory data from Germany. This is crucial. It elevates the sighting from a single-point observation to a tracked event, verified by independent scientific instruments. Third, the electromagnetic anomalies. While the link is circumstantial, the timing is too precise to be a mere coincidence. The grid fluctuations and communication blackouts began within minutes of the object's first appearance and ceased shortly after it vanished. So, what are the leading theories? The most obvious, and the one favored by military analysts, is that this is an advanced, top-secret human technology, a new generation of stealth reconnaissance drone, perhaps a joint US-European project being tested in the relatively quiet airspace of Scandinavia. This would explain the secrecy and the advanced capabilities. However, it doesn't fully explain the complete lack of any sound or thermal signature. Even the most advanced drones we know of produce some form of heat and noise. And why test it over populated areas where it could be so easily spotted? The second theory is, of course, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, that this craft is not of this world. Proponents of this view point to the non-aerodynamic shape, the impossible speeds, and the silent, gravity-defying movement as evidence of a technology far beyond our own. They argue that the electromagnetic effects could be a byproduct of a drive system that manipulates space-time itself. For centuries, we have scanned the stars for signs of life. This theory suggests that maybe life has come here to scan us. But there's a third, more unsettling possibility that is beginning to emerge from the fringes of this mystery. One that connects this modern sighting to ancient history. Archaeologists working on the Danish island of Bornholm, not far from the sighting's flight path, have long been puzzled by strange sunwheel carvings dating back thousands of years. These symbols, etched into rock, bear a striking resemblance to the triangular craft. Is it possible that what Ole Jensen captured on his camera was not a new visitor, but a very, very old one? A phenomenon that has been witnessed in these skies for millennia, mistaken by our ancestors for gods or celestial signs. This idea suggests that we might not be dealing with an alien invasion, but with something that has coexisted with humanity for longer than we can imagine. Perhaps a hidden intelligence, native to Earth, or a permanent, silent observer. This would rewrite everything we thought we knew about our own planet. The myths, the legends, the ancient symbols. What if they weren't just stories? What if they were records? Records of a presence that has always been here, just beyond our perception, revealing itself only in fleeting glimpses throughout history. The Danish Triangle wasn't an anomaly. It was a continuation. The implications are staggering. If this is true, then history is not a closed book. The world is not what it seems. We may be sharing our planet with an intelligence so ancient and so different that we have failed to even recognize its existence. The Danish sighting might be the key, the Rosetta Stone that allows us to finally read the signs that have been around us all along. The puzzle isn't just about a strange object in the sky. It's about our own place in the universe, and indeed, on our own world. The mystery deepens, and the search for answers has only just begun. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. The story is still unfolding, and you can be sure we'll be following every development. If you found this as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next investigation. What do you think is happening in the skies over Denmark? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Until next time, keep looking up. The night began with silence, the kind of silence that wraps itself around coastal towns, where the sea whispers more loudly than the people do. Denmark's northern shoreline lay under a blanket of stillness, broken only by the rhythm of the Baltic waves, the occasional creak of a fisherman's boat, and the hush of a late autumn breeze. No one, not a soul, could have anticipated what was about to unfold. It started small. A flicker. A lone light on the horizon. Pale, steady, almost indistinguishable from the stars that glimmered above. To the fishermen out on the open water, It looked like nothing more than a star misplaced in the sky. But fishermen know their heavens. They know Polaris, the Big Dipper, the seasonal arcs of light. This was different. This was wrong. Closer to the towns, those walking home under the dark canopy of night noticed the same anomaly. Some thought it was a passing satellite, others a plane banking its turn. But the light didn't move as it should. Instead, it hovered, patient, unblinking, as if it had chosen its place deliberately. Then, it changed. The glow deepened from pale white to a subtle amber, then shifted into a shade of blue unlike anything natural. It pulsed, once, twice, as though breathing. The fishermen exchanged uneasy glances. Children pointed skyward, tugging at their parents' sleeves. And then came the acceleration. In less than a blink, the object moved. A blur across the horizon, faster than any jet, faster than any meteor. Yet it stopped, dead still. No deceleration, no arc, just stillness. Then another instant acceleration, another sudden halt. These movements defied physics, defied every known principle of aerodynamics. By midnight, Denmark was awake. Phone calls poured into local authorities. Farmers in Jutland described a hovering orb illuminating their fields with an eerie glow. Motorists on rural highways stopped their cars, stunned as the object darted above them. Smartphones lit up as shaky videos began to circulate online. What started as whispers now became a flood. The first viral clip came from a group of teenagers in Copenhagen. Their footage showed a bright orb hanging motionless over the city skyline. Then, in a burst of brilliance, it shot upward, leaving behind a faint shimmering trail before disappearing, only to reappear seconds later miles away. The sound of panicked laughter, gasps, and hurried voices filled the background of the video. Within hours, the clip spread like wildfire across social platforms. Others soon followed. From the small town of Aalborg came footage of the object pulsing rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Witnesses swore the glow was alive, expanding and contracting as though the craft itself were a living entity. In Roskilde, families recorded the orb splitting, one light becoming two, the two becoming three before merging back into a single mass. None of the witnesses could agree on its exact form. Some swore it was metallic, others insisted it was pure energy, but all agreed on one detail: it wasn't human-made. By dawn, mainstream media could no longer ignore the storm. Danish newspapers splashed bold headlines, "Unexplained phenomenon over northern Denmark." Television anchors spoke cautiously, their voices measured, their words chosen with care. Scientists were invited to give opinions, but most hesitated. Terms like atmospheric anomaly and experimental aircraft were repeated, but even the experts seemed unconvinced by their own explanations. And yet the people knew what they had seen. By afternoon, international outlets picked up the story. BBC, Reuters, and CNN ran segments, showing the grainy clips alongside skeptical commentary. Governments issued no official statements. Silence from the military only fueled speculation further. Online theories exploded. Was this a secret NATO project? A Russian drone? Or something else? Then it appeared. Among the flood of shaky, pixelated videos, one photograph emerged. Clearer, sharper, undeniable. Captured on a professional-grade camera by a man hiking near Aarhus, the image showed the object in stunning detail. Not a smear of light, not a vague blur, but structure, lines, edges, a geometry that hinted at design. It was the photo that would change everything. The craft, if one could call it that, appeared as a smooth disc-like body, glowing faintly along its edges. A translucent dome-like structure seemed to crown its top, while the underside emitted a dim, radiant aura. The image revealed symmetry too precise to be random, and yet too alien to be human-made. The man who captured it, initially anonymous, quickly found himself thrust into the center of a storm he never asked for. His name would leak in the days to follow, but in those first 24 hours, only one fact mattered. He had photographed the clearest image yet of the Denmark UFO. News outlets scrambled to obtain rights to the photo. Online forums dissected it pixel by pixel. Experts from NASA, the European Space Agency, and even private photography labs were called to authenticate it. Skeptics screamed hoax. Believers declared vindication, but no one could fully disprove it. Something had appeared over Denmark, something that had defied explanation, something that had now been seen, documented, and believed by millions. And while the world argued, debated, and speculated, the phenomenon itself was far from over. For in the shadows of the first image, stranger truths began to unfold. Truths hidden not just in the skies above, but in the invisible forces surrounding Earth itself. The electromagnetic signatures. Fields began to fluctuate. Compass needles refused to align. Radio signals cracked with interference. Pilots flying over Denmark reported unusual readings on their instruments. Entire neighborhoods experienced sudden power surges followed by inexplicable blackouts. And as scientists began to quietly investigate these disturbances, a chilling possibility emerged. The object was not only observing, it was interacting. The photograph had gone viral. By now, nearly every major outlet on Earth had covered the story of the Denmark UFO, the clearest image yet. Some declared it proof of alien presence, others dismissed it as a masterful fake. But behind the noise of debates and arguments, something much more troubling was unfolding. Something you couldn't fake. It was the disturbances. They began subtly at first. A fisherman off the Jutland coast reported that his compass needle spun aimlessly for several minutes before stabilizing. Amateur radio operators noticed bursts of static flooding their transmissions at the exact hours the lights had been sighted. Airline pilots filed incident reports describing their cockpit instruments glitching mid-flight, forcing them to rely on backup navigation. None of these incidents alone would have raised alarm, but together, they painted a darker picture. Whatever was in Denmark at S skies was exerting a very real influence on Earth, S electromagnetic field. In Aarhus, a family described how their television flickered off and on, showing strange lines across the screen just as the orb passed overhead. In Aalborg, entire neighborhoods went dark for minutes at a time. Streetlights, homes, even backup generators refusing to function. Then, as suddenly as the outages began, everything would return to normal. Local energy companies denied faults in the grid. Scientists whispered about localized electromagnetic pulses. But there was something else. Birds. Ornithologists from Copenhagen University reported unusual migration patterns. Flocks of birds circled endlessly over regions where the UFO had been spotted, their internal navigation seemingly scrambled. Farmers awoke to find animals restless, agitated, refusing to settle. Dogs barked at empty skies, their ears tuned to frequencies humans couldn't hear. The disturbance was no longer just technological. It was biological. By the second week, the phenomenon could no longer be dismissed as local. Reports began to surface from neighboring countries, Sweden, Norway, even Germany. Each described the same anomalies: erratic compasses, power surges, malfunctioning electronics, and those same glowing lights darting across the skies. And then came the data. At the Technical University of Denmark, researchers quietly admitted to recording strange spikes in the Earth's magnetic field. Instruments designed to measure solar activity were detecting fluctuations that couldn't be explained by the sun. The spikes coincided perfectly with the sightings. One scientist, speaking anonymously, described the readings as controlled, deliberate, not natural noise, not random interference, almost as if a frequency is being emitted and it's targeting specific areas. Whispers of this leaked online, forums filled with speculation. Was it alien communication, a form of scanning, or perhaps something even more unsettling? An attempt to manipulate Earth itself? Governments stayed silent, but silence speaks louder than denial. Behind closed doors, military alliances stirred. NATO convened in private. Intelligence reports circulated warning of unknown aerial vehicles exhibiting capabilities far beyond human engineering. Satellites tracked unusual heat signatures near Denmark's coastline. Drones were scrambled, patrols intensified. But here lies the truth. No one dared approach the object directly. Fighter jets from Denmark's Air Force attempted intercepts. Pilots reported locking radar on the glowing orb, only to lose it instantly. It blinked out of existence, reappearing miles away before their very eyes. Missiles were never fired. Orders from above were clear. Do not engage. Whatever it was, NATO was not prepared to provoke it. Still, preparations began. NATO bases across Europe quietly entered heightened alert. Mobile radar stations were deployed. Warships stationed in the Baltic Sea received sealed instructions. Intelligence sharing between the United States and European allies accelerated. If this phenomenon represented a threat, the response would need to be coordinated on a scale not seen since the Cold War. Meanwhile, the public narrative grew more chaotic. Mainstream scientists, pressured for answers, stuck to cautious language. Atmospheric anomalies, unidentified aerial phenomena, natural explanations yet to be determined. But the people were no longer convinced. Viral clips showed the objects splitting into multiple orbs, reforming and accelerating with impossible precision. Eyewitnesses described feeling vibrations in the air when the orb hovered above. And then, the sound. Across multiple towns, residents began reporting a low-frequency hum accompanying the appearances. A sound too deep to record properly on phones, but felt in the chest, in the bones, more than heard with the ears. Engineers speculated it was infrasound, frequencies below human hearing that can cause unease, dizziness, even fear. Was it intentional, a form of communication, or a method of control? Theories piled higher than evidence. And yet the sightings continued. One night, an oil tanker passing through the Skagerrak Strait sent out a distress call. Their instruments had failed entirely. Engines stalled. The crew reported being bathed in an eerie blue glow as an orb hovered silently above them. Minutes later, the glow vanished. The engines roared back to life as if nothing had happened. The tanker limped to shore, its crew shaken, their story quickly buried. But buried stories have a way of resurfacing. Leaks emerged. Anonymous officials hinted that NATO had already classified the phenomenon as beyond terrestrial. Private communications between European defense ministries intercepted by journalists revealed discussions of possible engagement protocols. Suddenly, the possibility of confrontation was no longer theoretical. The world was paying attention. By now, headlines blared across every continent. UFO over Denmark sparks global alarm. Newsrooms debated whether this was the first undeniable proof of extraterrestrial technology or an advanced adversary's weapon. Stock markets trembled as rumors spread that air travel might soon face restrictions. And ordinary people staring up into the same night sky wondered if they were watching history's most profound turning point unfold. But what the public didn't know, what only select officials understood, was that the sightings were increasing in frequency, not just over Denmark. Satellite data confirmed glowing anomalies appearing simultaneously in Finland, the Baltic Sea, and even as far as northern Scotland. Whatever these objects were, they were spreading. And if they were spreading, then Denmark was not the end. It was only the beginning. By the time the third week arrived, the Denmark phenomenon was no longer a regional curiosity. It had become a global fixation. Every television station, every headline, every trending feed was dominated by one word: UFOs. What had begun as a single viral photograph had now exploded into a cascade of evidence. Videos were emerging daily, shaky phone recordings, high-resolution stills from professional cameras, even infrared drone captures. Some were easily dismissed as fabrications, but others, terrifying in their clarity, left no room for doubt. The orbs were real. And they were here. A fisherman in Bornholm uploaded footage showing not one, but 7 glowing objects hovering in formation above the sea. The lights moved in eerie synchronization, weaving patterns no human aircraft could replicate. Within hours, his video had amassed millions of views. News anchors around the world replayed it on loop, asking the same haunting question: what intelligence was behind this? In Norway, hikers captured stills of an object hovering above a snow-capped ridge. The photographs showed a perfect metallic disk, glowing faintly at the edges. Scientists scrutinized the metadata, confirming no digital manipulation. Even skeptics struggled to explain it away. But the most alarming evidence came from Copenhagen itself. On a clear night, hundreds of citizens gathered in the city square claimed to witness the orb appear directly above them. Dozens of cameras recorded it. The footage, streamed live across the world, showed the orb pulsating, growing brighter and dimmer in steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Witnesses described a strange sensation, as if their thoughts were being pulled outward, as if something beyond human comprehension was listening. For the first time, whispers of communication surfaced. Linguists, physicists, even cryptographers began poring over the footage. They noted the intervals of light, the oscillations, the deliberate patterns. Some argued it was simply energy fluctuations. Others insisted it was language, not random, not chaotic, but structured. "It is signaling," one expert boldly declared, "and we would be foolish to ignore it." Yet ignoring it was exactly what governments tried to do. Official press conferences continued to recycle the same cautious rhetoric. "We are monitoring the situation. We have no reason to believe this represents a threat. Please remain calm." But calm was impossible. Not when videos from ordinary citizens were showing a reality that officials refused to acknowledge. The result was chaos. In Paris, protesters marched with signs demanding the truth. In Berlin, conspiracy groups held rallies claiming governments were hiding contact. In London, citizens jammed emergency hotlines with reports of lights in the skies. Airlines faced a wave of cancellations as passengers refused to board flights over Northern Europe. Tourism in Denmark collapsed overnight. The tension wasn't just psychological, it was geopolitical. Intelligence leaks hinted that NATO had drafted an emergency framework for potential extraterrestrial engagement. The wording was vague, but the implications were seismic. If the phenomenon was acknowledged in military terms, then governments were preparing for more than observation. They were preparing for confrontation. And yet, even as nations scrambled, scientists fractured. The academic world split into camps. The first camp insisted this was irrefutable evidence of extraterrestrial life. They argued the technology on display, instantaneous acceleration, defiance of inertia, electromagnetic disruption, was beyond any human engineering. To them, the lights were not just visitors. They were proof we were not alone. The second camp resisted. They pointed to the possibility of experimental drones, classified weapons, or atmospheric illusions. They argued that human innovation, particularly in black-budget projects, could explain far more than conspiracy theorists admitted. If this was human technology, it would mean not an alien presence, but a staggering leap in military capability. The third camp warned against both extremes. They called for patience, data, evidence. But their voices were drowned out in the storm. Because the world was no longer waiting for evidence. The world was demanding answers. That demand grew louder after a new clip surfaced from a Danish coastal village. The video, grainy but undeniable, showed an orb descending into the sea. Fishermen described a shockwave rippling across the water as if something massive had plunged beneath. Naval radars later confirmed an unidentified object moving at impossible speed beneath the waves. The UFOs were not just in the sky, they were in the oceans. Panic spread like wildfire. If they could enter the sea, where else could they go? Were they already among us unseen, hidden beneath the surface of Earth itself? Questions multiplied faster than answers. In the United States, senators called emergency hearings demanding intelligence briefings. In China, state media hinted at aerial phenomena of interest being tracked near their coasts. Russia remained silent, but rumors swirled of increased submarine patrols in the Arctic. For the first time since the Cold War, world powers seemed united not in war against one another, but in dread of an unknown force above them. Meanwhile, the ordinary people, those who had watched the skies, who had filmed the lights, who had felt the hum deep in their bones, spoke with a different tone. Many were no longer afraid. Some called it wonder. Others called it destiny. Spiritual leaders described it as an awakening. For centuries, humanity had looked to the heavens with questions. Now the heavens seemed to be answering. But for every hopeful voice, there was another filled with dread. If these were visitors, why now? Why here? Why Denmark? Were they surveying, observing, testing, or were they waiting for something? And then, almost overnight, a whisper began to circulate across hidden channels. Anonymous leaks claimed that contact had already been attempted, not by governments, not by military officials, but by a group of independent scientists who believed they had detected a repeating signal within the pulsations of light. Using a carefully calibrated array, they beamed a simple reply skyward, a sequence of prime numbers, the universal language of mathematics. Whether the message was received, no one could say. But 1 week later, the orb appeared again. This time, instead of chaotic pulsations, its light flickered in a repeating cycle. 7 bursts, pause, 7 bursts again. Coincidence or a reply? The footage spread like fire. Forums erupted. Did we just make first contact? Was this the beginning of dialogue between species? The world waited breathlessly. Governments denied the story, of course. They called it fabricated. But the footage was clear, the witnesses undeniable, the pattern too precise to ignore. And so, as the orbs multiplied and the signals grew bolder, one reality became impossible to dismiss. The lights above Denmark were not random, they were deliberate, intelligent, and they were listening. The world was no longer just watching the skies, the world was bracing for impact. By early October, the Denmark phenomenon had escalated beyond sightings and speculation. Something new, and far more alarming, began to unfold. Across northern Europe, reports of unexplained blackouts multiplied. Entire neighborhoods in Oslo plunged into darkness without warning. In Copenhagen, sections of the metro system suddenly shut down, their control systems fried by what engineers described as untraceable surges. Communication towers across Sweden experienced sudden drops, their signals scrambled into static. It was as though the very air was charged, pulsing with an invisible force no one could control. Scientists raced to analyze the electromagnetic disruptions. Their instruments recorded massive spikes whenever the orbs appeared. Frequencies fluctuated, satellites glitched, compasses spun wildly off true north. Pilots reported their avionics systems going haywire whenever they crossed into northern European airspace. Some swore they could hear faint humming inside their cockpits, a vibration that resonated not through the machines, but through their own bones. And then came the storm. In mid-October, a violent burst of aurora-like activity lit up the skies above Scandinavia. But this was no ordinary aurora. The green lights bent and twisted unnaturally, wrapping around the glowing orbs that hovered silently above. Witnesses on the ground described the air itself buzzing, as if reality had been electrified. Phones, cars, even pacemakers failed simultaneously. Hospitals scrambled as life support systems faltered. For 3 minutes, Denmark stood still. When the power returned, the world was no longer asking if the orbs were affecting us. The world was asking what they wanted. Governments, already stretched to maintain order, could no longer hide behind silence. In Brussels, an emergency NATO summit was convened. Behind closed doors, military leaders and intelligence chiefs discussed the unthinkable. What if these objects were hostile? What if their electromagnetic pulses were not accidental, but a show of force? Whispers leaked that NATO had activated contingency plans under the codename Operation Sentinel. The framework outlined coordinated air defenses, satellite monitoring, and rapid mobilization of fighter jets across Europe. Publicly, officials spoke of routine preparedness. But inside the summit, one chilling reality was clear. Europe was on the edge of declaring the skies a battlefield. And yet, there was hesitation. How do you fight what you cannot understand? How do you defend against something that moves faster than radar, that bends light, that cripples electronics without firing a single shot? As nations scrambled, ordinary people became both witnesses and messengers. New footage emerged daily, fueling the storm. A truck driver in Jutland recorded an orb hovering just 50 feet above a highway, his dashcam capturing the surreal glow before the feed cut to black. A mother in Gothenburg filmed strange ripples coursing across the surface of her living room window as the orb passed overhead, the glass bending as though it were breathing. These clips spread like wildfire. The world wasn't just watching Europe anymore. They were waiting, terrified, desperate but for the next move. And then, something even stranger happened. Radio operators across the North Sea reported picking up signals that should not exist. Not voices, not words, but patterns. bursts of frequency arranged too precisely to be random. Analysts claimed the sequences mirrored prime numbers, just as earlier light pulses had. Theorists asked the obvious question, was this communication? Governments, however, treated it differently. They called the signals interference. They downplayed the growing belief that humanity was standing at the threshold of first contact, but their actions told a different story. Satellite imagery showed NATO vessels clustering across the Baltic. U.S. reconnaissance planes were spotted making continuous sweeps of the skies above Denmark. And in one leak, an anonymous air traffic controller claimed fighter pilots had been ordered not to engage, but to shadow the orbs, to track their movements at all costs. It was a strategy not of defense, but of observation. As days stretched into nights filled with glowing skies and anxious silence, the atmosphere grew unbearable. Civilian protests erupted across Europe. Some demanded governments reveal the truth, others demanded military retaliation, and a small but growing movement gathered in the streets of Copenhagen carrying signs with a single plea: do not attack them. For in the chaos, one chilling possibility had begun to take root. What if the electromagnetic pulses weren't weapons at all? What if they were warnings? Or worse, what if they were tests? The idea spread quickly. The lights above Denmark were probing us, measuring our infrastructure, testing our responses, preparing for something larger. The question was no longer if we were being observed. It was how much longer before the observers made their move.
As the world's gaze fixed upon Denmark, something even more unsettling began to unfold. Satellite feeds, military radar, and even civilian drones captured new angles of the unidentified craft. In the still frames, the object seemed impossibly smooth, devoid of seams, rivets, or any sign of human construction. Some experts claimed it resembled liquid metal suspended in midair, morphing slightly as if adapting to the environment. But what shook researchers even more was the way it reacted to observation. Each time a camera focused too long, the object would distort, flickering as if it were aware of being watched. This strange interplay between technology and phenomenon raised a terrifying question. Were these objects not just physical intruders, but conscious ones? Civilians across Denmark spoke of electrical disturbances in their homes' appliances flickering, lights pulsing, even phones recording bursts of static when no one was touching them. Pilots reported compasses spinning wildly as they approached the airspace. And then came the whispers accounts of strange low-frequency sounds resonating in the night, a droning hum that seemed to vibrate through the bones of anyone nearby. By now, governments could no longer ignore what was happening. Leaked NATO briefings suggested that rapid response protocols were being drafted. Military analysts spoke quietly of containment strategies should these objects become hostile. Yet, behind closed doors, there was another fear. What if aggression triggered something humanity could not defend against? And so the standoff grew tense. Denmark became the epicenter of a mystery gripping the globe. Live streams racked up millions of views as ordinary people aimed their cameras to the skies, hoping to glimpse what might be history's greatest revelation or its greatest threat. Then, in the midst of this fevered anticipation, one final incident occurred. A farmer on the outskirts of Aarhus recorded the craft hovering silently above his fields for nearly 4 minutes. The footage showed the object pulsing with light, casting shadows that bent in impossible directions. And just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished, disintegrating into a flash so bright it illuminated the horizon like daylight. Silence followed. No explosion. No debris. Nothing left but the memory of what had been. Storm broke. Denmark awoke to uncertainty. Were the objects gone? Or were they simply waiting? And perhaps the most haunting thought of Olaf, this was their way of saying hello. What will goodbye look like?